On the 27th of June, 2011, a team of observers appointed by India's Supreme Court walked down a narrow stone staircase beneath a temple in the city of Thiruvananthapuram, in the state of Kerala. They were there to do something nobody had done in living memory. They were going to open the cellars and write down what was inside. What they found in 5 of those chambers has been valued conservatively at more than $22 billion. Gold thrones, crowns, sacks of coins minted before the Roman Empire existed, a solid gold statue of a god, 4 feet tall, studded with diamonds, and then they reached a door they did not open. It is called Vault B. It has stayed shut ever since. Today I'm walking through the richest temple treasury on earth, chamber by chamber, from the smallest to the one nobody will touch. And there's a question underneath all of it that I want kept in mind the whole way down, because it turns the entire fortune inside out. Who actually owns a treasure that was formerly given to a god? Let's go down. First, the reason any of this exists, and it starts with a king giving everything away. The Sree Padmanabhaswamy Temple is dedicated to Vishnu, shown reclining on the coils of a great serpent. The temple is ancient, but the fortune inside it has a specific origin and a date, and Marthandavarma was not a minor king. In August of 1741, at a coastal village called Colachel, his forces defeated the Dutch East India Company. A South Indian kingdom beat a European naval power in open battle at the height of that company's strength in Asia. Historians regularly describe it as one of the earliest instances of an Asian state defeating a European colonial force at sea. The Dutch commander was captured and ended up serving Travancore. That victory mattered commercially, not just militarily. It secured Travancore's grip on the pepper trade of the Malabar coast at a moment when black pepper and cardamom from this stretch of India moved through Europe at extraordinary prices. Spices were the oil of the 18th century, and this kingdom controlled a share of the tap. So in 1750, 9 years after Colachel, at the peak of his power, the warrior king performed a ceremony called the Thripadidhanam. He surrendered his entire kingdom to the deity. Not symbolically, in the way monarchs sometimes talk about serving a higher power. Legally and completely. From that day forward, Marthandavarma and every one of his descendants ruled not as kings of Travancore, but as Padmanabha Dasa, the servant of Padmanabha. The land was the gods, the revenue was the gods. The rulers were, in their own official description, stewards. Now think about what that means over the next 2 centuries. Every tribute paid to Travancore, every offering from a merchant, a pilgrim, a rival prince, every victory, every trade concession from the spice ports of the Malabar coast at a time when pepper and cardamom moved through Kerala to the entire world. It all flowed into the temple, and crucially, almost none of it ever flowed back out. That is the mechanism. Most royal fortunes are spent, taxed, divided among heirs, gambled, or seized. This one had a religious lock on it. Taking it back out would not have been theft from a treasury. It would have been theft from a god. So it accumulated for 261 years. And here is the detail that proves how well that lock held. In 1971, India abolished the Privy Purse. The 26th Amendment to the Constitution stripped the country's former ruling families of their state payments and their official privileges in a single stroke. Hundreds of royal houses across India, some of which had ruled territories larger than European countries, lost their guaranteed income and their titles overnight. Travancore's family lost that too. What they did not lose was the temple treasure, for the simple reason that it had never been theirs. A government can cancel a royal allowance with a constitutional amendment. Cancelling a religious endowment made by a king in 1750 is a different proposition entirely. The wealth survived the end of the Indian monarchy because legally no monarch owned it. Now the chambers. There are 6 principal vaults labelled A through F, and they are not equal. Start with the small ones. Vaults C, D, E, and F were, relatively speaking, the routine chambers. They held ceremonial articles, ornaments, and objects used in temple ritual, and some of them were opened periodically over the years for festivals and ceremonies. In the 2011 inventory, these were the quickest to catalogue. That sounds unremarkable until the scale registers. Even the ordinary working cupboards of this temple held gold ornaments and precious articles that in any other institution on earth would be the centerpiece of a national museum. These were the vaults considered mundane enough to open for a festival, which brings the question back, whose gold was that sitting in a cupboard? Not the family's, they were servants. On paper, it belonged to the deity. Then came Vault A, and Vault A is where the numbers stop making ordinary sense. The inventory of Vault A produced the bulk of the treasure. Reports describe a solid gold idol of Mahavishnu, roughly 4 feet high and 3 feet wide, studded with diamonds and other precious stones. A solid gold throne, reportedly made to seat an 18-foot idol of the deity. Thousands of gold chains, ceremonial gold coconut shells set with rubies and emeralds, and then the coins. Around 2,000 pounds of gold coins, some dating back to roughly 200 years before Christ. Not medieval, not from the era of Travancore's kings at all. Currency that was already ancient when the temple's fortune began. There were loose diamonds, loose rubies, loose emeralds. Not set in anything, not catalogued, not displayed, stored in bulk the way a bank stores paper. Add the 5 opened vaults together and the figure that emerged was more than 1 lakh crore rupees. In dollars, more than 22 billion, and that is deliberately described as a conservative figure because it counts metal and stones. It does not attempt to price the antiquity. A gold coin from 200 BC is not worth its weight in gold. It is worth whatever a collector would pay, and no one has ever tested that market with a hoard this size, because none of it has ever been sold. Let me anchor $22 billion. That is comfortably more than the entire estimated fortune of the King of Malaysia. It is in the same range as the personal wealth of the Sultan of Brunei, who sits on one of the world's great gas reserves. It exceeds the annual budget of the state the temple stands in. And it was all in the basement of a single building, in the middle of a city, behind doors that the general public walked past every day, which raises an obvious practical problem. For centuries, the security on the richest treasury on earth was essentially a religious taboo and a stone staircase. Nobody had audited it. Nobody outside a small circle knew the scale. The moment the 2011 inventory made headlines around the world, that changed instantly. Kerala's state police moved in. Security around the temple was overhauled, with armed guards, surveillance, and a level of protection the site had never needed in its history. Consider the irony in that. For 261 years, the treasure was safe precisely because nobody had counted it. The single most dangerous thing that ever happened to this fortune was somebody writing down what it contained. And the building itself gives no warning of what sits underneath. The temple's tower rises about 100 feet over 7 tiers, in the Dravidian style. Inside, the deity reclines on the coils of the serpent Ananta, in a form so large that worshippers view it through 3 separate doors, one for the head, one for the torso, one for the feet. There is no single vantage point from which the whole god can be seen at once. That is a fitting description of the fortune below it, too. No one has ever seen all of it. Now, Vault B, the door that stayed shut. Vault B has not been fully opened since at least the 1880s. That is the claim, and it is where the story stops being an inventory and starts being a genuine mystery, because there is no agreement about what happened at that door. The royal family's position was this. Over the years, only the anterooms of Vault B had ever been entered. The main chamber, the innermost one, had never been opened. And there was a reason beyond caution. The door is associated with a warning. It carries an image of serpents, and by tradition, opening the inner chamber invites catastrophe. In 2011, when the inventory was underway, the family and a number of devotees urged that Vault B be left alone. That could be dismissed as folklore. Except the legal record disagrees with the family's account of the facts. The Supreme Court's own amicus curiae, the independent lawyer appointed to advise the court, together with the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, the country's national auditing authority, told the court something very different. They stated that Vault B had in fact been opened, once in 1990 and twice more in 2002. Read that again. The chamber that had supposedly never been entered was, according to the National Auditor, entered 3 times in 12 years. and no complete public accounting of those visits satisfied the court. So the mystery of Vault B is not really about a curse. It is about a discrepancy. The people who guarded the door said one thing, the auditors said another, and the only way to settle it is to open the door, which is exactly the thing nobody has agreed to do. Behind that door, estimates of the contents run wildly, and honestly nobody knows. It could hold a fortune that dwarfs the 22 billion already counted. It could hold very little. Every confident number attached to Vault B is a guess, and the guesses have been spectacular. In the years after the inventory, headlines circulated claiming the temple's total treasure ran to 1 trillion rupees and beyond, with some accounts pushing the figure into ranges that would make this single basement the largest concentration of wealth in human history. Those numbers are not accounting. They are extrapolation, built by taking the counted vaults and assuming the sealed one must be bigger. There is no evidence for that. There is also no evidence against it. That is the entire problem, and it is why the story refuses to die. An unopened door in a building, known to contain $22 billion, is an invitation to imagine anything at all. What is documented is narrower and stranger. The door is made of iron. It carries the image of serpents. It has no visible bolts, latches, or conventional locking mechanism, which is part of why the tradition around it took hold. And the last complete uncontested opening of the innermost chamber is not recorded anywhere that anyone has been able to produce in court. Which brings this to the strangest turn in the whole story. The case that opened those chambers began with one man. T.P. Sundararajan, a lawyer and a former police officer in Thiruvananthapuram, filed the petition arguing that the temple's assets needed state oversight and a proper accounting. His litigation is the reason the vaults were opened at all. He died in July of 2011, weeks after the inventory began. He never saw how the case ended, and he never saw the outcome, which went against the argument he had made. In 2020, after nearly a decade of litigation, the Supreme Court ruled on who should control the temple. The verdict upheld the rights of the Travancore royal family in the administration of the temple, with management placed under a committee structure. The family that had called itself the servant of the deity for 270 years kept its role as custodian. Uthradam Thirunal Marthandavarma, the head of the family through most of the fight, did not see the end of it either. He died in 2013, 7 years before the judgment. And Vault B stayed closed. The court, for all its orders about inventories and committees, never ordered anyone to force that inner door. So, the question from the beginning: who owns $22 billion in gold and gemstones sitting under a temple in Kerala? Not the state, which argued for control and did not get it in the way it sought. Not really the royal family either, whose entire claim rests on being the servant, not the owner. In the legal and religious architecture of this place, the assets belong to the deity. The family administers them, nobody inherits them, nobody can sell them, nobody can spend them. That is the thing that makes this fortune unlike every other one I cover. A super yacht can be sold, a palace can be sold, a stake in a bank can be signed over in an afternoon, as Thailand's king demonstrated. But a treasure formerly surrendered to a god in 1750, guarded by a family that describes itself as staff and adjudicated by a Supreme Court that declined to force the last door, is a fortune with no exit. $22 billion that cannot be spent, cannot be divided, and cannot be liquidated. Wealth that exists purely as an object, sitting in the dark, counted once in 261 years. And one chamber, behind a door marked with serpents, where the guardians and the national auditor tell two different stories about whether anyone has been inside at all. The richest vault on earth may not be the one they counted. It may be the one they closed the staircase on and walked away from. Nobody alive can tell with certainty, and the only people entitled to find out are the ones who have decided not to. If this walk through the world's strangest fortune was worth your time, you know what to do. I'll see you in the next one.